The trial of Officer Blake Thurman was supposed to be routine, at least that's what his defense team believed. A handful of misconduct charges, some allegedly altered reports, a few excessive force complaints that never quite stuck. In any other jurisdiction, it might have been swept under the rug or handled quietly with a resignation and a pension. But this wasn't any other courtroom, and this wasn't any other judge. From a second, Blake stepped into courtroom 4B of the Westland Federal Courthouse. His disdain was obvious. His jaw clenched, his eyes darted sharply from corner to corner. But the real target of his bitterness was already seated at the bench, Judge Miriam Hargrove. She was in her 70s, slight in frame, with a head of carefully styled silver hair and a cane that rested against the polished oak beside her. To Thurman, she was nothing more than an old woman clinging to authority in a world that had moved on. But Judge Hargrove was far from fragile. The lines on her face weren't signs of weakness, they were maps of every battle she'd endured. The courtroom was silent, except for the distant clicking of her cane as she rose to take her seat. Her robe fell around her like a shroud of earned command, and though her voice was calm when she opened the session, it sliced through the air with the precision of a scalpel. "The court is now in session," she announced. Outside, the spring air was swollen with the threat of rain. Inside, the courtroom was packed journalists, civil rights observers, off-duty officers watching with folded arms, their expressions unreadable. The gallery was standing room only. There was a buzz in the atmosphere that no one could quite name, something volatile, something coming undone. Thurman, seated at the defense table in a too-tight suit, leaned back like he owned the place. His legs sprawled, his tie hung like a choke cord. His attorney, a seasoned but visibly uneasy man named Nathan Kellis, whispered close. "Let me do the talking," Kellis warned. "Do not react. Don't blow this." Thurman sneered. "You act like I'm guilty. You are on trial," Kellis snapped quietly. "If this were a real court, with a real judge, we wouldn't even be here." From the hallway, the slow, steady tap of Judge Hargrove's cane grew louder. She only donned her robe at the threshold, as if it were armor. The moment she stepped through the doors, the room fell into reverent stillness. Her presence was quiet power. The first witness was a forensic analyst named Diana May. Calm, clinical, she explained the inconsistencies in Thurman's official reports. Body cam footage that had gaps. Dispatch records that didn't align. Statements that were strangely revised. Each word stung, though she never raised her voice. Thurman shifted in his seat, muttering just loudly enough for those near him. "She's fabricating this crap." Judge Hargrove didn't miss a beat. "Mr. Thurman," she said without looking up, "you will remain silent." "With all due respect, this is a joke," he barked. "You will listen," she replied calmly. "Your counsel will respond during cross-examination." "Sure," he muttered, "like that'll matter." The bailiff stepped forward, tense. Hargrove raised her hand slightly. "Not yet." She could feel his slow boil beneath Thurman's skin. He wasn't just angry. He was unraveling. Then came a surprise witness. Lieutenant Martin Reddick. The courtroom hushed. Reddick had filed an internal complaint against Thurman back in 2019. "I reported his use of force," Reddick said, "and I flagged that one of the tapes Thurman submitted was altered." "Was there an investigation?" the prosecutor asked. "No," Reddick replied. "Captain Lionel Bryce said there wasn't enough to go on. He retired 6 months later." Thurman's face darkened. "He hated me," he spat under his breath. "This is revenge." "You're out of line," Hargrove stated. "You put me in a courtroom with people who've been gunning for me for years," he snapped, standing. "And you call that justice?" "Sit down," she ordered. But he didn't. In one motion, too fast, too smooth, Thurman's hand dipped into his jacket. A collective gasp rose. The bailiff reached for his weapon. Hargrove didn't flinch. Thurman drew a small black pistol, sleek and deadly. "Nobody move," he shouted. Nobody breathed. The courtroom froze in terror. "You brought a gun into my courtroom?" Hargrove asked, her voice cool. "I brought the truth," Thurman growled. "And you're going to hear it." "Put the weapon down," the bailiff warned. "Shut your mouth." Thurman barked, swinging the gun wildly between them. Then back at the judge. You think I won't do it? You already have, she said. The second you raised that gun, you shot down every word you ever claimed meant anything. He paced now, trembling slightly. You want to talk bias? Let's talk about yours, he ranted. You're just another political activist wearing a robe. No, she said evenly. I'm the reckoning your system never saw coming. Thurman looked around, sweating, shaking. I bled for this city, he said, voice cracking. And now you treat me like I'm the disease. You weren't the cure, Hargrove said. You were the infection. From behind the walls, SWAT officers moved into position. Silent. Precise. You should be afraid, Thurman said, his voice lower, darker. He raised the gun toward her. I'm not, she replied. Because this ends with you. He hesitated. Fury and fear warred in his eyes. Then he pulled the trigger. The sound echoed like thunder. But Miriam Hargrove did not fall. The bullet struck the benchwood, splintered, air cracked, but she sat unmoving. Missed, she said quietly. A beat later, SWAT stormed in. Command shouted. Movement swift. Thurman turned, raised the gun again, but he never fired. They tackled him, disarmed him, dragged him away in cuffs while the room watched in disbelief. The courtroom emptied slowly. The reporters filed out. The whispers turned to silence. Judge Hargrove stayed seated. She traced the edge of the bullet hole with a steady finger. 1 inch to the left, and the world would have lost her. But it hadn't. The next day, the courthouse was a different place. Not one of fear, but of purpose. Hargrove arrived through the service entrance, carrying a folder tucked tightly under one arm. Personnel files. Case histories. Names she recognized. And within days, things began to shift. Complaints that had been ignored surfaced. Body cam footage mysteriously never filed suddenly reappeared. The same names kept appearing. Bryce. Reddick. 2 prosecutors who signed off on resolved complaints that were never opened. Hargrove made one call to investigative reporter Claudia Vance. No cameras, she told her. No headlines. Just facts. And the facts poured out like floodwater. Internal affairs couldn't hold back the tide. A statewide hearing was announced. Subpoenas flew. By month's end, over a dozen officials were named in the investigation. Thurman wasn't the only one. 1 week later, Hargrove met with him face-to-face at the detention center. No robe. No security detail. She wore slacks and a pale blue sweater. Her silver hair in a low bun. Just her. Just truth. Thurman looked different too. The bravado was gone. Still cuffed, still bitter, but smaller somehow. Here to gloat, he muttered. No, she said. I came to thank you. He blinked. Thank me? Lady, I nearly shot you. And in doing so, you exposed everything. He looked at her long, hard. You think this is justice? No, she said. This is the unraveling. And your name was just the first thread. There was nothing more to say. She left him with the weight of that silence. In the weeks that followed, Westland changed. Civilian oversight boards were created. Teachers, students, mothers, veterans, people who had never been asked to look closely were now watching with open eyes. One day, a mural appeared on a building near the courthouse scales of justice, not held by a blindfolded woman, but by dozens of hands in every shade. Slowly, painfully, things moved. And months later, Blake Thurman stood in a courtroom again. No badge, no uniform, just a gray suit and shackles beneath the table. The gallery was filled, not with media, with people. A janitor who testified about forged logs. A woman whose brother had vanished after an arrest. A teacher who remembered what fear looked like in her students. The trial was swift. The verdict was clear. Guilty on all counts. Miriam Hargrove sat in the gallery that day. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply watched. Because justice wasn't spectacle. It was a hand steadying the back of truth. As the room emptied, she remained a moment longer. The sunset bled orange through the courthouse windows. Then came the sound of small footsteps. A girl, no older than 12, stood at the aisles end with a notebook clutched tightly. "Are you Judge Hargrove?" she asked. "I used to be," Miriam replied with a soft smile. "My school, we learned about you. They said you didn't back down. I did what was right. The girl held out the notebook. "Will you sign it?" Miriam hesitated, then took the book, scribbled a message, handed it back. The girl read it, eyes wide, then whispered, "I want to be like you." "No," Miriam said, resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Be better." Outside, the wind picked up. The courthouse loomed behind them, and ahead in the road, not yet paved, walked a woman with silver hair, a cane, and a legacy not built on power but on persistence. Justice had cracked open, and through it, something brighter had begun to grow.